Welcome, thinkers, to Season 4, Episode 13 of Thinking Critically. This episode is part 3 in our series of marketing in the TTRPG creator space. You'll find links to parts 1 and 2 in the episode description, so go check them out if you like what you hear today. Otherwise, I continue to stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/thinkingcritically my homebrew D&D 5e campaign, now at 90 sessions, almost every Tuesday. So go and check us out there. See me DMing and seeing me putting my money where my mouth is. Anyway, let's get on with the show. Once again, I'm joined by Zack Applewhite from Applewhite Games. Thank you ever so much for joining us again. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Zack Applewhite, the marketing half of Applewhite Games, which I run with my extremely talented wife. I am, in addition to being a professional corporate marketer with a specialization in search engine optimization, I have also on the side been gathering audiences on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, ran several micro Kickstarters in the TTRPG space, as well as poetry for some reason. And the main reason that I'm here today, again, coming back always, is because I'm in a unique position as a professional marketer who knows corporate marketing, but also is in the trenches. I am uniquely situated to add value to help all of the amazing people in the TTRPG community who are extremely talented, extremely creative, turn that creativity toward marketing in a way that is sustainable, because I'm in the trenches too. I work the 9 to 5, and everything I do for my side projects, for the stuff that I hope to become a full-fledged business, I have to do on almost no budget and almost no time. And so I try to boil everything down into very minimalist marketing and just help educate people and help everyone achieve their goal and level up.
Awesome, amazing. And if any of that has whetted any of your appetites, Zach's been on the 2 previous episodes, Kickstarter, so you can hear a little bit more about those micro Kickstarters, including the poetry one, and one on marketing, which was very enlightening, I have to say, not coming from a marketing background myself. And I think with today's episode, you are now the most prolific guest on the show. So congratulations.
I'm honored. Wonderful. Well, that's good, because I have a surprise for the end of this episode.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, continuing on our theme, today's topic is branding. So what does that mean to you in the D&D and wider TTRPG framework?
Yeah. So the fun, terrible thing about branding is that it's a very big word, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, even in the professional marketing community. So the thing to understand when you think about branding, because if you go out and you do your own independent research, you're going to run into a lot of studies on corporate branding. You're going to look at Blizzard, or you're going to look at Chipotle or Amazon and all these big things. And while there is a sliver that matters to the people who are in all likelihood listening to this podcast, probably Wizards of the Coast isn't listening to this, you're great, but I don't think you're on their radar yet. For the small creators like me, who are either side hustling or they're making this their main hustle, but of course it's a small business, only 20% of the stuff that you're going to find research on really matters to you. The in the trench stuff is the personal branding. It's a little different. It also has a whole different rule set. But in general, the general definition of branding is its reputation. Just think about it like that, okay? It's what people are and are not saying about you when you're not in the room, when you're not around to ask them a survey. And so to give you like a little perspective, think about your TTRPG characters or your group. It probably has, your group might have a name. Let's call them the Vultures of Dunwith. Okay? What do people think about and say about the Vultures of Dunwith when they're not around? Do people have an ominous, eerie feeling, or do they feel like they're heroes? They're probably different things to different groups of people depending on what chaos you wreaked in their town. But that's the branding. Okay, it's the feeling behind the name. It's tied to experience, and it's usually also tied to a story, either invoked by the people who are behind the brand or by the people who have experienced the brand. And so that's a generalization. I know that was a lot, and unfortunately, that's a very tiny microscopic piece of what branding is, but that's why I'm here today, to help us zone in on what really matters to the small creators.
Yeah. Thank you for that. There's several things there I wanted to touch upon, but the first thing is that definition. And I know it's ironic because I always start the episode with asking the guests to define the topic. But specifically for, in my academic years, many years ago, where I did, business studies to a certain extent, and we did marketing and advertising and branding and all those things, I must admit, the definitions of those all do kind of smush together, but specifically those three, like marketing, advertising, and branding. I know there's probably some professionals out there, including yourself, that are grimacing at me, saying that they're all the same thing. I know they're not, but certainly from a newbie's perspective, it is one of those things. It's like, am I doing it? Have I done it? Have I done one because I've done the other? And what does that Venn diagram look like, I suppose, before we move any further?
Absolutely. So the thing is it's just like how you can't do business without doing marketing. You can't do business or marketing without doing branding. Because at some point, after you've created your product or your idea, you have the idea or thought process or insights that you want to communicate, the second you put yourself out in front of people, you're doing the thing. You're doing the branding. You're doing the marketing. And so that means that, like, even if all you're doing at this point, because if you listen to the marketing episode, I recommend, hey, let's say you want to get on Twitter and you want people to start listening to you. Well, the first thing to do is you go out and just for like a month to 3 months, just comment. Just be a good consumer. And that will teach you how to be a good producer. But even in that consumer phase, as you're commenting and interacting with people, you're building a reputation. You're building rapport. You're building a voice. And that's right there in that very, very beginning stage. That is marketing. That is branding. All right. It gets bigger. It gets more complicated. It gets personal as you go forward. But in the Venn diagram of where it is, advertising is only when money is exchanged hands for attention. So we can set that aside, because I also hate to spend money. All right. I've done it. I'm still working on being any good at it. But we can set that aside for now. Marketing is any time you're trying to get people to listen to your message. And that message might be vote for this, buy this, or just be entertained by this. All right. Branding is what happens after the message. Okay. So I see your tweet. The brand is what I think about you, what I think about your tweet, how this tweet aligns with all your other tweets, and how that's building my impression of you. And most importantly, something that I do want to get into today is it's about the action. Because you can say anything, but we all hate our cell phone companies. We all hate our insurance companies, at least a little bit, because they say so many things, so many nice things, so many consumer reports and 5 stars that they plaster themselves with. But their actions, all right, as soon as you're on their horrid customer service line, that's where the branding really matters. Because the marketing can get you the first sale, the branding, that's what gets you the second sale. That's what gets you the 5th sale, the 10th sale. That's what gets you a fan who's going to care.
Okay. That's really good definitions there. Thank you for all that. And regarding putting advertising to one side, as we record this, and probably the episode when it goes up, we are knee deep in a cost of living crisis here in the UK. So not spending money is, I think, a huge tick box for myself and several of my listeners, I imagine. So that's perfect. Good to hear.
The really good news about branding is that you should do it at no cost. Okay, the advantage that smaller people like us have against the bigger Goliath corporations is that they have to outsource their branding to paid actors. Okay, so you look at the insurance over here in America, we have like Flo from Progressive. All the insurance agencies have this guy or girl, Geico's Gecko. All right.
Yes.
Cereal and their mascots. Okay. They have to outsource. And by the way, sometimes leading to huge controversy when the human on the side of that character is less than ideal. Looking at Subway, for example, horrible situation. They have to outsource that branding. They have to pay for it. We don't. Because the branding in the small creator scope is us. All right, we are our own influencer. The furthest we can go into outsourcing that is small influencers, which at our level is more of a partnership than it is just a money exchange. And that's part of the branding too. All to say, you don't need to spend money.
Yeah, that's you mentioned it before. You mentioned it just then, and I'm glad you did because it's at the top of my list of notes as well. So let's get into the meat of one of the main topics of today, which is how, as you said, at our size, how the person is the brand, how you present yourself, how you interact, what you say at an individual level. So let's talk about that for a minute and what that means. Then, when that is the baseline, what does that mean for creative? You know, how do we achieve good branding? And then there must be some secret. I want there to be a silver bullet.
Absolutely. We all want our +1 magic sword that'll do the work for us. So here's the very basic line of good branding. Number 1, have something to communicate. It's okay if at the start of your endeavor you haven't fully fleshed out what you want to do, and all you have is like, I know I want to be on I want to do podcasting, or I know I want to make videos, and you don't know exactly what you want to say. Just go ahead and figure out what you're doing, and then you can figure out the branding later. Okay? So the first step is to have something to communicate. Step 2 is to communicate it. And that communication might be, let's just say, the Kickstarter situation. I communicate that I have a product. I communicate that I want you to buy it. Next step of branding, okay, after you've done that, and that's marketing as well, you've made the sale. Now you have to execute on it. So you need to deliver your product. And if you're doing good branding, you're going a little bit above and beyond. You're putting personal touches into it. When we fulfilled our latest Kickstarter, Chronicles of Aragarth, we did our first physical book. We wrapped them in a nice just brown paper with a piece of twine. We got a wax sealing kit off Amazon so that we can make it feel really special. That right there, packaging, that's branding. Something that sets us apart. It was a little bit of user experience for the person opening it up. It's a special touch that is not scalable for other corporations. Apple cannot have people wax sealing their stuff over and over again because it doesn't sound complicated, but you need wax and fire and someone there to do it properly. All right, and hand tying things by twine. And then part of that is the follow through. That's the step 4. Follow through is staying in touch with them, not disappearing after you've made a sale and then suddenly appearing again when you have something else to sell to them. Branding is building a relationship in a way. Part of that is really, really good branding is when you make a mistake and you overcome it, but we can get to that in a second. The other part of really good branding, and this is a part that I struggle with, okay, I am trying to do this better, is showing up. Show your face. Because I love to hide behind GIFs.
Who doesn't love a good GIF?
I love to hide behind memes. And if I could communicate solely in memes, GIFs, and movie quotes, I would. Okay.
Yeah, now we realize why you've come on 3 times is because I had 2. Very similar.
But this is part of me showing up, and while I'm decent at it on like video, I show my face all the time. That's part of the medium. On my Twitter, for example, I almost never post a selfie. All right, but you want to talk about, like, there's a small creator. His name's Hawkmere on Twitter. All right, that's his Twitter account. He shows a picture of himself every day All right. He shows a picture of himself and oftentimes some of the amazing food he's eating.
Mm-hmm.
And even though Hawkmere is not like, he's not constantly selling me things. I know he's connected to Talon and Claw, but I have no idea the depth of that connection and exactly his role. But I know him. Okay? And whether or not he's told me his story, I've concocted a story based on repeated evidence of him showing up and showing me his face. I know he's into fitness. I know he owns some really cool shirts. And I know he has great taste in food. Whereas if I only feed you memes and GIFs, all you know is I'm funny. You know? And that's a start. There is nothing wrong with starting there. That has gotten me pretty far. But as I'm continuing to try and get people to trust me with their money, the stuff that fuels their life, I am working on that. Good branding is taking it the step further and becoming something more than the funny guy, becoming someone that you can trust to take your money and return something of equal or greater value, and then not disappear on you.
Mm, which is very tricky, I imagine.
Well, in the process of creating, I think what most creators do is, one, they only talk when they have something to sell. And so that either means that they're talking all the time, but only about what they want to sell, which gets old really quickly. Even if you're a really nice person who wants to support the community, you're going to get what's called banner blindness, which is when, the early computer days, we had banners all the time on every website on the side, and consumers figured out a way to just completely ignore them to the point where impressions mattered zero. The same thing can happen if you communicate over and over and over again that you have something to sell. Also, what can happen is, okay, you did the Kickstarter or whatever, you've launched your YouTube series, your podcast series, and it's out there, and now you have all this other work. You need to build, you need to ship, you're waiting for people to show up and listen, and nothing's happening. All right, so on the, let's say you created a TTRPG map set, okay? You are now in the printing and delivering phase, and you don't talk to your consumers for 3 months. So one is, well, they're going to forget about you. Two is, that's 3 months you're not growing your audience for your next project. And you can't expect your audience to stay in touch with you on their own volition, and care about you and spread the word for you on platforms that you're mostly inactive on, just on their own charity.
Mm-hmm.
The good branding comes from being there, even if it is just funny GIFs and memes. Okay? Yeah. At least you're still in the room. Even if you're not a big part of the conversation, even if you're not putting yourself in the spotlight, you really can't over-communicate. It's more, Twitter is a cocktail party, is a kind of old saying where you're there to have conversations. You can have opportunities to plug and talk about yourself, but you're mostly there just to hang out with the other cool people there. And if there was a guy in the room who was just always, whenever he opened his mouth, talking about his cryptocurrency, okay, that he just launched, or his NFT project, okay, that's what it feels like, you understand? Is that it's that one guy in the room who's just there to sell, all right? It's not all networking. It can definitely be leveraged that way once you've figured out a way to continue to contact and maintain some attention, but that should not be the whole of their experience with you. I said a lot of words. Did I make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it's always this tricky balance, and that's what I've been thinking about while we've been talking, is that line between the human being, especially for small creators like us, one or two people, the human being behind the mouse and keyboard or behind the phone, versus the almost like persona. I guess you want to. Well, do you want to build a persona? How much should you distance yourself if you're trying to build a specific brand or a specific style of thing, and how much of the real you should be a part of that? Should you do any disassociation between you, the brand, versus you, the person? I guess is a good way to put it.
So a few things there. Let's talk about strategy for a second. This is where the corporate me's coming out. If your strategy, let's say that you created a podcast, let's call it an esports podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
If that's the goal of the podcast, you might want to end up selling that, right? And so you probably don't want to put your name all over the place. All right. If your intention is to sell the product, same thing with a game company of like, if you have any intention to, in 20 years, consider taking a step back at whatever level of success you're at and potentially passing it on to someone, whether that be a friend or someone who's looking to buy in, you probably don't want to be the sole face of that because Oprah couldn't sell the Oprah Winfrey Show. All right. What's the Oprah Winfrey Show without Oprah? So if I make Applewhite Games, it has my last name in it, it's probably going to stay a family company. All right. I have no intention of selling it. So I've put my name in it. And while I'm at it, I'm going to really put myself in it. My wife is an aspiring author. She's a self-published indie author. And so it makes all the sense for her to be as personal as possible, with, of course, the caveat of don't do anything you're not comfortable with.
Sure.
Which is a hard sentence to say because you're going to find things to be uncomfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
It's not comfortable all the time to talk about yourself. All right. And that is something where I myself will say that the modern consumer really values that vulnerability. There's this hard line. It is impossible. I am the professional here to tell you, I don't have a silver bullet for this. Everyone has their own line of what's talking about myself and it being annoying because everyone thinks I'm talking about, myself all the time, and what's talking about myself in a way that adds human connection. The only real advice I can give you is start with what you're comfortable with, take one step beyond, do it more than once, do it a couple of times, because a lot of times we try something once, it doesn't do anything, and we think, okay, well, that didn't work. Try it a couple of times. Try it for a week. You may think that people are sick of seeing pictures of food. Try posting what you're having for lunch every day for 1 month. And then if it's flat, throw it out the garbage. But you might find that it's actually something that people interact with, and you can start to circulate that into your content as a way of building your brand and building your reputation and humanizing yourself. Because I'll tell you something that's definitely true is that on our level, people do not want to buy from a logo. Okay, it's not like Starbucks where we can see a logo, we can see a store, we know what we're going to get. Okay, when you're on Etsy, when you're running a self-shop, people are interacting with you. And they need to trust you because you can't hide behind a logo because that logo does not have the top-tier brand recognition that's had millions of dollars spent on it. Okay? Yeah. Even in the earliest days, Macintosh, Starbucks, they built the trust behind that logo through genuine action, through trying hard for a good long while until they could get to the point where they could spend millions of dollars to just have it blasted into your eyes and ears so that you have a level of expectation for it. So I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you.
No.
It's a personal balance. And I will say that I'm still working. I'm always going to be working on finding that balance because as you get to different phases in your business, you're going to find that different things are required. What got you here won't get you there kind of situation. So your strategy on branding and how much you communicate with people is going to change over time. And you're just going to need to continually reassess and try new things and innovate. And the good news is that from my experience with people in the TTRPG space, whether they're dice creators, artists, shirt makers, TTRPG designers, map designers, there's a huge marketplace. They're all creative. And I believe wholeheartedly that if they turn that creativity and innovation inwardly, that they're going to find out that they have a lot more options and opportunities than they might have originally considered.
Thank you for that. There's quite a few points in there that I wanted to double down on. I really, really like and hadn't thought about that dynamic nature of it. The fact that, well, how did you put it? You put it better than I ever could. What got you to here today won't get you to your next step tomorrow. That kind of thing, I think, is very useful and very important to have just knocking around in the back of your head. And now I've sat back and think about it just from my podcast journey, I could, by no stretch of the amount, I'm not huge at all. That's not what I mean. But even from starting from, obviously, we all started at the same place with 0 fans and 0 followers. From what I was doing then to what I'm doing now, even that has changed just subtly by my own instinct, almost, I guess, in the last 2-3 years. But it's there's value there to actively think about it rather than letting it be a reactionary process. And the other thing I wanted to double down on is, you're absolutely right in that you say consumers today want that personable brand. They want to help another human being, basically. We're all, I think, a little bit burnt out with the big companies doing big evil things, and the money that you give them, even if you're at a Subway or at a Starbucks, the money that you're paying for that, 99% of it goes to their bank rather than the person that's actually giving you the service. And we're all a little bit burnt out by that process. So having a face behind the logo, a bit more of an active face behind the logo, certainly at our size, is a huge boon. That single reason of, hey, I'm, the consumer can think, I'm actually helping another human being here. I've made their day. I've liked their tweet, and that's someone on the other side of the world. That's certainly how I feel when I get interaction. Is, hey, I've made someone else happy, and they've made me happy, and that's it. That's like the most fundamental human nature I think that there is in the world.
Yes, the one-to-one of, there are people. Let's just talk about my own experience here with Kickstarter. They are backing me. They know me. They know my wife, because I put pictures of us on there, and I have little bios, and I talk about how Kaylin's been in the TTRPG space as a consumer since she was a little kid, because her Jedi Master father had her nerding out with HeroClix and D&D since she was old enough to read and write. Okay, and I came in, and I'm just got taken over by this as my wife brought me into it. All right, became my dungeon master, and I just decided that this was going to be a major part of my personality now. And they know me, and I get to know them, and I get to know because they tell me that when I send them this hand-packaged, we're putting love into this book, all right, packaged book, that they tweet back at me that they got it, that they're excited, and everyone gets warm, fuzzy feelings, and you cannot get that at the corporate level. That's where us small people we're one-to-one. There's not this huge corporate ladder. It's one-to-one. It still gets complicated because, I talk about, like, you can't hide behind a logo. We need our logo. We need to be Applewhite Games because we're two people who have our own creative abilities. Kaylin is trying to grow as an indie author while also building all these great TTRPG stuff. But we're going to get people on the author side who do not care about the TTRPG stuff, and vice versa, who want to play the TTRPGs but have no interest in reading, not because they don't like Kaylin, but because that's just not what they're in the market for. And so we have a hard time, all right? We're in a very interesting place where we have to build Kaylin's brand completely separately, where she's her own logo, while also working in tandem with Applewhite Games. And it's a fun little problem that basically we've addressed by anything game-wise gets Applewhite Games, and she's seen on there as a major creator. But for her books, it's all Kaylin. You will not see an Applewhite Games logo on Kaylin's books because it is important that she is growing her brand in the publishing side, and Applewhite Games will grow its brand on the game side. So it can get sketchy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, it's just different demographics, isn't it? At the end of the day, so it absolutely pays to, in that specific instance, is to have those two identifiable brands for the two audiences, and there might be some cross-contamination between the two of them, but not always.
There certainly is. Our TTRPG backers, our first collection of short stories was set in the TTRPG world setting, and that was to help Kaylin be introduced to our backers as a writer of actual stories, which we were smart, strategic. I'm going to go ahead and pat myself on the back here. What we had was we started with short stories being added to the module material. So that at the end of the module material, as you're playing through everything, you could also see through the eyes of someone who lived in that area that you're playing through, and they might even be an NPC that is in the game that you're going to interact with. Okay, which to me deepens the immersion, makes an excellent play experience. Bonus, it's a short story written by Kaylin Applewhite. And so when we come back to you 3 modules later and say, hey, those 3 short stories we put in, go back and read them. If you like them, we have a book with those 3 plus like 12 more, that you've never read before, and you're going to enjoy them. That's another instance of like, what got you here won't get you there. If all we did was the short stories at the back, she's never going to be able to write a novel that way. And also to hark back to the whole, if what got you here won't get you there, a small note I want to add to that is like, that applies everywhere. What got you 300 followers on any given platform is not what's going to get you 3,000, is not what's going to get you 10, 15,000. I struggle with this, okay? I have realized if you feel that something's getting stale, you're probably right. You probably need to try new things and never be afraid to make mistakes, because as I've talked about on the marketing side, if you decide that you're going to post pictures of food and no one interacts with it, that means almost no one saw it, which, good news, almost no one saw it. That's the wonderful thing about, like, specifically the social media side, is that by design, most people aren't going to see your flops because they're flops. That's by definition, they don't get seen much. So feel free to test things. Feel free to make those little mistakes that you're like, okay, great, no one wants to learn about Zack's tacos. Okay, we've learned that, we can move on to the next idea. Let's see if they're interested in Zack's cat.
Well, that's a surefire winner for sure. But I think that's a really, really, really important point, because most humans people are scared to try new things most of the time. Again, I'm generalizing, but it's scary, fear of failure, all the usual academic stuff that's been talked about a million times before. And that is doubly so for social media, because you're putting yourself out there on the internet, not just, oh, let me try and crochet something in my bedroom at home. Whoops, didn't work. Oh, well, that's just me that knows. If I start putting things on the internet, loads and loads and loads of people might know. So that fear of failure is magnified. But what you've just explained is that it's just a perception. It's just perceived magnified, because in reality, it doesn't really matter as much.
It is still more on display than if you were in your room. Sure. So here's talking some metrics. So let's say that you post a tweet and it's got 112 impressions on it. Okay. Think of impressions like you're driving down the highway and you go past a billboard. You could probably not recite to me every word that was on that billboard. Most people do not. That is how it's like when you're scrolling through your phone, going through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You're only actually stopping and looking at a few things. Okay, but everything you scroll past, that's an impression. So of those whole 100 impressions you got, those people kept scrolling. They didn't even perceive what you said or that it was you, which becomes really frustrating once you've found some success. Okay, and you're trying to get as many eyeballs on you as possible. But in this instance, it's a bonus. When you're trying new things, the algorithms test it out on small batches. And if they do good in the small batches, they start releasing it out to the bigger batches. Okay, and it's all based on activity. Did you get people to stop for that impression? Did they interact with it? Did they share it? Did they comment? The more rich the interaction gets, the better, and the more people will see it. But there's a gatekeeping quality of, if those first 100 people just kept scrolling, there's your answer. And guess what? Of those 100 people, 1 or 2 actually stopped to look at it. 10 perceived it. 1 or 2 actually stopped to look at it and probably did not think, ha, look at Zack. He thinks that tacos are important. I'm going to unfollow him immediately. That noob. The casual. All right.
I'm a staunch anti-taco person,
yes.
So this doesn't agree with me.
I am immediately retweeting this to my millions of followers about how bad Zack is at marketing and his stupid tacos. Okay? In all likelihood, they either were like, tacos, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, oh, that's weird, Zack's talking about tacos, moving on. They've got more important things to do.
Yeah. I think, now we've been thinking about it, I think I've, again, not to toot my own trumpet too much, but I think I've kind of done this as well. So to get a little bit introspective for a second, obviously thinking critically is it's just me. It's behind the logo. So obviously I bleed out, down low through my thinking critically socials, and one thing that I enjoy as a regular human being is nice craft beer and so on and so on. And I have in the past, when I've been at a tap room, at a brewery somewhere, at an event, I have tweeted a review or a tag or something, and in hindsight, thinking back, they never got huge amount of interaction. My new, obviously TTRPG stuff does get more interaction. My new episode tweets, they get a bunch of interactions, and I just organically don't do them as much, and I don't think that has negatively impacted me. I just wanted to provide a real world example to what you were saying of like, I did it. It wasn't like earth shattering, didn't, triple my followers because Stanley's talking about beer. I can only presume people went, oh, cool. He's at a tap room in the UK. Great. Good for him. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, I think that's a great thing. Okay. Whenever we do something special, we're like, at a theater, we'll try to me and Kaylin will take a selfie and we'll share that out. There's crossover there. Is that I know a girl on TikTok where literally all she talks about is D&D and top shelf liqueurs.
Wow.
That's literally it, is that she will talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and the other half of her videos is her sitting in front of a big table of dark liquors and talking about it. You have no idea where your crossover is, and you never will until you try something. For example, personal experience, I have found out that if you like D&D, your propensity to also like anime is actually pretty high. Because whenever I post how I would play this D&D, this anime character as a D&D character on TikTok,
I've seen him. Yeah.
My follower count on those videos goes skyrocket because people who like anime see that and they're like, wait, that's my niche. I didn't know this was my niche, but this is my niche. And they hop on over to me. I never would have known that if I hadn't tried something different. The first 2 videos, first 2, 3, or 4 videos of that were absolute flops. But as soon as I brought Bakugo from My Hero Academia into the mix, suddenly it works. That was probably 6 failures in. By failures, I mean it just didn't do like any different than my other videos, and maybe even just did blatantly worse.
Yeah. I laughed earlier because I'm looking around my office / recording studio now, and there's at least 2 anime posters and a couple of figurines knocking around as well. So I was like, yeah, he's on the money with that one. That's that's true. For those who've seen the streams, you'll have seen behind me my Evangelion stuff. So yes, that's very true. I have to say, I'm living the niche right now.
It's a great T-shirt design, living the niche.
Yeah, that's yep. You can. That's it. That's the quote of the episode.
There you go.
Lovely. I wanted to talk briefly about. We mentioned, the person behind the logo. We've mentioned it in passing a couple of times. The logo. Obviously, I've got my pink and purple aesthetic, something I feel quite strongly about, and is easy to have a strong, identifiable color. Mm-hmm. So that's something I've been quite keen on from day one. Is having that pink and purple, recognizable at a glance. But I know we've talked at length about how important the person behind the logo is. But I wanted to frame what we've talked about so far with a brief discussion on, quote unquote, that initial gut feeling, that Starbucks logo, that Amazon logo, that Thinking Critically logo. What can we do there? How important is it? What things should we look out for in a, if we're thinking about rebranding or initially branding for those creators that haven't put something out there yet? What are some tips and tricks for building a recognizable and a decent logo?
Yeah. So again, it depends a bit strategically on what you want to accomplish as you go through. For example, if you're an entertainer, I think that you probably want your face. This is assuming you're one of those entertainers who's multimedia. Okay, so your chosen medium is podcasting. You've done some of the content distribution stuff that I talked about in the marketing campaign, where you go beyond that medium, but it's a core. The distribution comes from the core of the podcast. Okay, there are other creators and artists out there who want to be multimedia. They want to be on theater stages. They want to be singers. They want to be on YouTube next to Critical Role. They want to be speakers up on stage. They want to be authors. They want to be a lot of things. For them to restrict themselves to one logo probably isn't going to be productive. But in this case of like Applewhite Games, we have a logo. We are Applewhite Games. We're going to continue to do games. We're also doing publishing stuff. We probably could have been Applewhite Incorporated, but that would have slipped away some of that. That would have over barriered the brand of it, because now it sounds too professional, too button up.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question is, first, think about what you want to accomplish. Two is that I will say that where the logo really does help is in that recognition. I've changed my profile picture on Twitter a couple of times, realizing that for the first 3 years I had a Twitter going, my face wasn't on it, and I also didn't have a logo. It was me with my back turned and my son on my shoulders. It was a very cute picture.
Yeah, with the Dragon Ball jacket.
Yeah, with the Dragon Ball Z jackets. Yeah. That we took that into the Origins Game Fair in Columbus. It's very recognizable. It had a bright orange, but then my tweets would go viral on Facebook because I did the thing where I screenshotted a tweet and it went over to Facebook, and it would be everywhere, but no one would recognize me. And because of where I want to be 5 years from now, it is uncomfortably important that people know what my face looks like. That people see the Twitter and they can connect it to my TikTok.
Yeah.
So on my personal Twitter, I put my face for the brand stuff to get back centered, and let's zone in on that. For the logo, yes, you want to be eye-catching. Most importantly, you need to like it. I fully just recommend liking it. I'm doing some stuff right now where test it, come up with variations, put it on Twitter or Facebook, and this is one of the ways that you can interact with people and have them be a part of you and your brand and what you're marketing through and what you're building, is asking them their opinion. Use that as a resource as much as you want. People love to give you advice. Okay? Everyone loves to have a moment where people want to hear from them. So ask that question as you're trying to build things up. And that's honestly because I'm not a graphic designer. I can't get you into here's the color theory. I know that blue is trusting, that green means fresh, and that red means hungry. Okay? We have red on ours. So clearly, I'm not professional. Red was just what matched our aesthetic, and it stands out on little materials. But in general, keep it simple, very simple. Not a lot of words. Yours is good, okay? It's got 2 words on it. It's got a form of a brain-looking thing, and I see a little 20 in there.
Yeah.
And I don't see the 20 the first time I see it, which frankly is the most brilliant thing about your logo. Is that I see something different when I look at it for the 20th time. Is that I notice something clicks. That's a surprise and delight moment built into your logo. That's actually probably one of the most genius things you've done.
Oh.
So, applause for Dan.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm allowed 1 flash of brilliance a year, and I think that was it on that year.
Right. As the one inspiration for this adventure.
Indeed. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. But in general, it's so easy. I tried making a logo a little while ago. I just overcomplicate things so easily. You want like 2 to 3 words maximum, preferably 1 word. Okay. Or if you can take out the word, even better. But when Facebook's now just the F. When it was starting out, it was Facebook. And I think it even had a little script underneath the Facebook to kind of explain what it was. So there might be a time, in a few years when we're the biggest gaming company or whatever, not going to happen, where we could just have the A of Applewhite Games.
Yeah.
And it means something. But in the beginning, you need to say something, like thinking critically. All right? And you need to have preferably one center image. All right? So think about Starbucks. Again, that has the name on it most of the time. But now if you see that little mermaid, you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
That to answer your question is, and I'm not brief about anything, as briefly as I can. That's my brand. Okay. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll stop talking, or else I'll just say the same thing 14 times.
No, not at all. No, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to sound so pretentious now, but from my, I had a vision, is all I can say. I had the idea of obviously thinking critically, brain. That's a classic. That's a common trope. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, ooh, I could have the 20, natural 20, D20, whatever you want on the brain. And then I've kind of got 2 things in one there. And I was very lucky that my friend's wife, who did the artwork, just knew instinctively from a 4 or 5 sentence paragraph of me describing in words what I wanted. And that came out the other side. One iteration, one and done. Boom. No, no, can you change that? Can you tweak that? I was just...
round of applause for her perfect. As well for the execution.
Yeah, because I'm also definitely not a graphic designer. So there's no way I was doing that at all. But yeah, through my verbiage, she managed to pull out what I was after, and it was spot on. So since then, I've just been very, as I said, my one flash of brilliance, and that was a flash in the pan. No, I can't do any other endeavors or new businesses in the future, because that's it. I've peaked too early now.
I promise you haven't. I'll also make a quick note, as quick as I'm capable of making, because logo does get confused for brands sometimes, and this is my quick analogy of where they differ. Okay, so branding originally comes from like marking pieces of wood or livestock with a symbol, and that symbol marked ownership. And what does that ownership really mean? Is don't touch my stuff. So if you're leaving this brand of, let's say my name's McAllister, everyone who knows that McAllister branded goat, if you mess with his goat, XYZ is going to happen. Whether McAllister is a pushover or an absolute terror. The brand isn't the same thing. If someone else can have their brand on their goat, and it means he's a pushover, we can steal his goat, it'll be fine. Whereas if you take this goat with this brand, it is not fine. Okay, he is coming after you. That's the analogy I use to help kind of separate logo from brand, because there's a meaning behind what you see.
I love that when you look at the actual, the etymology of the word, it's always, we keep it simple, right? It's how, we open this discussion with, can you define branding for me? And now we're almost closing it with, what does it mean? We still use it in that term. Like you go and look at cows out in the pastures and whatnot, and they'll be branded in the most literal sense of the word. And there is value to looking at that word through that lens. Where does it come from? What does it mean? And how can you apply that to what you're doing today? And I'm kicking myself now for not doing that most basic research.
No, it's fine. I skipped over it. I could have talked on it earlier, but I skipped over it because I think that most people instinctively nowadays, just due to like public market conversation around branding, most people understand that brand is different than logo. They just kind of know that they're intertwined a little bit, but plenty of people have brand and don't have logo.
Yeah. Ooh.
So that's where like I skipped over it. There is one thing I want to talk about, because I know that we're probably getting close to the wrap up, about really good marketing. I want to talk about mistakes, because this is the part where branding shines. All right. And I'll talk about a very recent personal experience is
Mhm.
that we published that short story of books.
Yep.
And though we read through those stories several times, the very first story, especially, had a number of typos. I think we made last run through edits on some sentences that got misplaced, and it really pulled you out of the story in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
Our backers were gracious enough to tell us, I mean, as nicely as possible. These backers have backed us before. We have an excellent backer return rate on our Kickstarter because we've done good branding. It really showed here because they told us as nicely as possible, okay, hey, there's some errors here that really impact my experience in a negative way. Now, my first instinct, my lizard brain instinct, was, are you kidding me? We've worked so hard on this. Like, was just anger and defensiveness.
Yeah.
Luckily, I took a moment to step back and really ask myself what needed to happen here. And so I came back to that person and I thanked them as profusely as possible that they said something, that they noticed, and they cared enough to say something, because that says so much about how nice that person is and how good we've done of leaving that door open, that they felt safe sharing that, and that they gave us that opportunity. We went through again, we did an audio listen through, which we have now added into the process of all of the books that we have in production. All right, so we improved our process. We thanked the person. We could have just stopped there. We update the ebook and stop there because no one else was complaining, right? And that's what most people would do. They wouldn't have done as much as we did there, and then they would, if they did that, they would have stopped there, put their head in the sand. No one else is complaining, so it's not a problem. Maybe we don't want to make a problem that doesn't exist, right? Wrong. It's an opportunity to stand on a pedestal and say, hey, we made a mistake. We promised you something, and we did not all the way come through. And that is not our brand. When you do something that is not on brand, call yourself out. Especially if the people supporting you like you enough to call you out in a nice way. Because how many nice people on the internet will point out your mistakes nicely? So we stood out there. We said, listen, we cannot fix the physical books that are already out there. We apologize. This is not okay. Here is how we are improving. We thank everyone for their patience with us, for their understanding that we are small, that it is just me and Kaylin. But we're not using that as an excuse. We're improving our process. We are going to update the ebook so that everyone else who reads from now on can have a better experience. And that improvement is solely thanks to you. And we hope that you will continue with us on this journey as we continue to try new things, make mistakes, and make them better. And so that's one thing, is that I'm going to say, you're going to make mistakes. You're human. But because you're human and your audience knows it, they can forgive you. It is harder to forgive a logo when your coffee's made wrong. It is harder to forgive AT&T when your cell phone bill is incorrect. But forgiving Dan Lowe, for forgiving Zack and Kaylin, is much easier. By building good brand, you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room so that when you make completely human mistakes, it doesn't kill you. It doesn't kill your brand. Because what didn't happen was that someone didn't read that, drop us, and say that they'll never buy from us again, which is the case for most people who were hiding behind a logo. Because we put ourselves out there, they reached out to us, not a customer support service, to us. And we were able to make things right. And that's just something I wanted to communicate, because that is going to happen to everybody. And they're going to want to be angry and defensive. And I hope that they hear me in this moment and do the thing that's going to give them long-term success and genuinely make themselves feel better in the long term as well.
I'm a huge huge proponent of accountability and transparency. I advocate it in my professional career and have done so for many, many years. Perhaps I've worked with too many people whose where transparency and accountability wasn't very high on their list of priorities, and so much so that it's become a huge priority for me. It's something I talk about at work loads. Obviously, working 9 to 5, however many hours a week, you have a lot more opportunity to make more mistakes. So I'm the first one to say, hey, whoops, I forgot to send that email, or whatever it may be. Or the other side of that coin is then when you compliment somebody or credit somebody, it has a lot more weight behind it because people know you're genuine and honest and truthful. So when I say, hey, that person over there really helped me out or did a great job, people go, wow, okay, fair enough. That's legit. That isn't pandering or any kind of politics. It's just straight up Danlo being honest, which is my personal brand that I really have spent a decade and a bit trying to build in my professional career, and I hope shows somewhat in this podcast TTRPG space that I am trying to build as well. So that was my first point. And my second point is my lizard brain was very happy when you were saying there about your improving the process, because my project manager and me is like, oh, he's done a lessons learned, and they've iterated and they've improved the process. So next time that mistake isn't made, or is less likely to be made. And I was like, oh, love to hear it. Love to hear it.
Yeah.
So we've I'm super happy today because we've talked a lot about my two main things that I want to talk about. One, which was the person behind the brand and what it means to put yourself out there and how to put yourself out there and how to conduct yourself online and all this other kind of stuff. So I'm super stoked we've really closed the loop on that discussion with your personal story there of making that mistake. And again, I feel that pain. I've done dissertations in my life, several that have been many thousands of words, and having read the same thousands of words many times, 10th 20th reading, you go, how did I spell the word house wrong?
Right.
How is that even how could that even be possible? It's like a cognitive dissonance. You're like, it's impossible that I've read this paragraph that many times and have not noticed that word.
It's bizarre and unthinkable.
Someone's hacked into my computer and changed the wording. So no, it's a pain I feel very much myself. So thank you for sharing that anecdote there. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we might have missed or not gotten to yet?
Oh, goodness gracious. The problem with, again, like I said earlier, is that branding is such a huge thing that this could have been a 4-episode series.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that we have covered some really valuable areas for those small creators where they can do something actionable by being honest, by being forward, by continuing to iterate on what they're doing, and by understanding where to use their face and where to use their logo. I think that those areas that we've covered are probably the most valuable for anyone who isn't making a regular over 10 grand in sales. All right, which I know I'm not. When I get there, I'll let you know what you need to do when you're at that stage.
Yes. Well, thanks. Well, we can always have you on for, if you really want to secure yourself at the top of the podium as the most prolific guest, then, the 4th episode is always, waiting. We can do more branding.
That is the plan. I am 100% there.
So usually at this point, I say, is there anything you would like to plug or promote? But I wanted to mention, because you mentioned it earlier on about the last Kickstarter you did, the Heroes of...
Chronicles of Eregarth.
That's the one, sorry.
Yes.
Because that was in the previous episode's notes for references to yourself. So you mentioned it before, and I was like, oh yes, I remember finding the link for that and popping it in the episode notes. That was like, oh, I've helped a little bit, maybe. I don't know. But
that is live on Amazon now. The Kickstarter went great. The good news is that we do have stuff coming down the pipeline, and I have a surprise for you.
Oh, okay. Well, let me. I don't want to rob you with a surprise. So, is there anything you would like to promote?
Oh my goodness, yes, there is. So the one that's not a surprise that we're in later this month of October / early November. So I'm not sure if the podcast episode will come out, but if you're lucky, you'll get to see our $1 holiday special that we do every year, where we give a ton of value for $1. This one is the Willowdale Horror, and that'll be live on Kickstarter later in October / early November. Hope you can see it. If not, don't miss the next one. Follow us on Kickstarter. The thing that I am decided to just release on this is that November 19th, I'm doing a live webinar on TTRPG marketing for 2023, where I'm going to be doing I've already started a lot of research to help identify trends, tools, techniques, insights, and covering over some of the news that's happened to help TTRPG people just in the marketplace. Again, the dice makers, the people that are making dice towers, holders, module creators, everyone who's in the market, friendly local game stores, everyone who's in the market, I'm trying to give value of. Here's where 2023 is going, because in America, just like we're dealing with recession marketing as well. And I wanted to do a business marketing podcast for Tabletop. Don't have the time, don't have the capacity, but I know I can once a year or even hopefully once a quarter. This is the start where I can sit down, take questions, and just help people understand what's coming down the road and what they can do to react to it. So that's going to be happening November 19th live on YouTube, hopefully around 10 a.m. Exact details will be on my socials. You can follow me on Applewhite Games on Twitter, or you can follow Applewhite Games on Facebook, but Twitter's probably going to be the number one place to contact me, and I'm going to be spouting that all over the place because I want everyone to go into 2023 with a strategy in mind of how they're going to succeed.
Wow, that is awesome.
You're invited, by the way.
No, that's awesome. I'm stoked. Yes, this episode will be out before then, so that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, so as usual, I'll put as many links as possible, and hopefully by the time the episode airs, we'll have all of them can be in the episode description as well as all of Zack's socials, so you can go and check him out on all that other stuff. Well, the only thing left to say is thank you ever so much for joining us again, Zack.
Thank you so much for having me. I cannot wait to return for number 4, whatever the topic may be at that time.
And so, yeah, if anyone's enjoyed what we've talked about today, you can go and check out the Kickstarter and marketing episodes at thinkingcritically.co.uk/ either Kickstarter or marketing, and that'll take you to those 2 episodes where we have gone into detail. Well, I say we have, Zack mainly went into his expertise on those 2 topics, and I just listened and took notes like a good student should. So I thoroughly encourage everybody who's enjoyed today's episode to go and check out those 2. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and good night. And now it's time for the Patreon shout-outs. Thank you to Joe from the Fourth Leg podcast. Again, 2-time guests of the show. And the Fourth Leg is a TTRPG podcast all about giving new GMs a leg to stand on. Please go and check them out at the Fourth Leg on Twitter. Thank you to Optional Rule, a 2-time guest of the show and a very insightful and knowledgeable source of information. Please check them out at www.optionalrule.com. Huge thank you to a great friend of the show, Matthew Perkins, who's out there making hilarious and educational Dungeons & Dragons content. Please go and check out his stuff at matthewperkins.net, where you can find links to all of his socials and all of his content, including his own Patreon, which I would very much encourage you to check out. Thank you to Matt Street at mpstreet88 on Twitter for supporting the show. If you need support running your personal or business schedule, head to virtualtimehustle.com or on Instagram to make that difference between should do and done. Boss it better with support that essential time you've been searching for. If you would like to support what we do and get 4 shout-outs a month, head over to patreon.com/thinkingcritically, or you can just buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/thinkingcritically